Alright, this is going to be a video on just a quick spring change for the KWA series of AEGs. So it's like the SR5, the SR7, SR10, SR12. I think they're doing a SR14 now. Tools you need: long Phillips, small Phillips, medium-sized Phillips. You will need a Torx T10. If you don't have the screwdriver itself, you can get it at like a tamper-proof screwdriver set. The spring. In this case, I'm using SP110 by Garter. This should get it just about 400 FPS. Spare battery, flathead just in case. And then I use a flat magnet when taking apart the gearbox. And then I use trays to keep all the small parts. Two quick notes: this is an older model SR7. You can tell because the newer one has a Allen key on both sides of the rear body pin. First things first, you'll want to cycle it once or twice to make sure that it cycles fully, because if you have it on a partial cycle, you cannot actually remove the upper receiver. So if you're trying to remove the upper receiver and you have problems with that, shoot once or twice in semi, it should fix that. So pop off the rear butt plate, the side, and in the normal style, there's a fuse and wire assembly. It's just two small Phillips heads. This one they bypass the fuse, so it's much easier. Pull up the socket adjust lever off the that. At this point, I remove the rear body pin. This is a 2.5mm grub screw. Which I can grab my tools. When I disassemble, I keep the body parts and the AEG parts in separate bins to just make it easier during reassembly. Pop that out. And then just push up to tilt it. And then I take off the front body pin next. Knock that out. Put the upper to the side. Then you'll need your long Phillips to get the Phillips head screw that holds the buffer tube to the gearbox. And if you can't see in there very easily, just use a flashlight, line up and take it out. And as I'm disassembling or unscrewing the Phillips head, I also push up on the buffer tube slightly, that way to avoid stripping the screw. We'll wiggle the screw up, the screw and the washer will come out. Buffer tube comes off. Move the sink plate. Next up, two Phillips screws in the bottom of the pistol grip. For the KWA pistol grips, the screws are the same. There are similar ones of different brands where the screws are different sizes. Most of the time, the long screw is in the back. Use a flathead just to pry this base plate up slightly so I can get to it. And there's two wires. Pulls up slightly. And the motor should come out now. There are two Phillips heads in the bottom of the pistol grip. And most of the time when you unscrew these, the Phillips heads will stay inside the pistol grip. This is why I keep everything in a parts bin, so that way it's easy. Next thing, there's a pin that goes by the trigger right here. It's marked on one side. Sometimes you can tell where it's marked because you got to punch in the opposite direction. I can't see easily on this side, so I'm going to take a 2mm Allen key. It's a nice cap. And yep, So it's a bird on this side, so I had it from the opposite side. And the cateways use this annoying 2-piece hop-up unit. So there's 2 Phillips screws. Now when I disassemble these, I don't put this piece in with the rest of the gearbox pieces. I actually, or the body piece, I actually put this in the tray with all my gearbox pieces. Because when you reassemble it, this has to go in basically first. Otherwise, you'll put the gearbox and everything back together, and then you gotta go back and put that in. So at this point, almost done. Just gotta pull the gearbox now, wiggle it. It's being a pain. You can kind of shove a flathead in the back. Let's get a little pry. Oh, no, I'm done. The magazine release, which is a 1.3 millimeter. Another annoying thing about the KOAs is they have weird grub screw sizes for a few things. Here for these pieces, I actually just do I screw them back together slightly. That way, it's easy to keep these small pieces back together. There you go. Now the gearbox comes out. Move the that piece. Comes out. All the fun wires. Wipe this down quickly. And then I also just do a quick inspection on the gearbox, looking for any cracks, any obvious problems, things I should watch out for. I'll put a glove on because this stuff is nasty. So first thing, for this gun we already cycled it, so I don't need to reach in here and pull the anti-reversal latch with a screwdriver because it's completely cycled. But normally at this point you would do that. Next, this uses the annoying Torx C10s. Undo those. The Tokumuri also uses Torx bits primarily. So getting a Torx C10 and I think a T8 is just something handy to have. If you're going to work on KBA or Tokumuri guns. And the KBA guns do get a lot of bad rep from people online. But the nice thing about them is they actually have part and warranty support in the United States. So just if you need parts, just KBUSA.com, which is nice. And if it's not listed on the website, call them, and most of the time they have it. So at least it's easy to get. Bad thing is they're proprietary-ish. I mean, you can get non-KBA parts in here. It's just annoying at times. So if you need to replace something, just stick with their parts. And then I'm gonna get these 2 Phillips screws. Before I do the last Phillips screw, I'm going to put my magnet underneath anti-reversal latch, which is right here. And this is always pushing in. There's a spring underneath here. So a lot of times when you pop open the gearbox, if you don't have this magnet, that spring is going to go this way. The first gear is going to go this way, while you're holding on to the trigger and this main spring. So it just makes this much easier. And then I'm also going to hold down the whole assembly. Everything in place, remove my last screw. Now I use a small flathead, kind of wedge it in there, just pry things everywhere. I'm not going to pry the entire gearbox open, I just want to get cracked so I can get my fingers in there, move the rest of the way. I'm pushing down with the Allen key for the mainspring. Once I get in there and get my finger in there, hold it down. I'm going to lift up the tool, the mainspring comes out. Much easier. I'm not doing anything else with this gearbox. I know the shimming's good, I checked that. Check other things. Everything's good, everything's in position. This is my garter spring. you want to put the tightest coils in the front. See, this is the tighter coil section. This one's pretty loose. This always goes in the piston. So, go ahead. And when you're resetting the gearbox, you want to have this gear in the ready position, which basically means this little notch is at about the 2 or 3 o'clock. I'm doing that just by turning this first gear, and that anti-reverse light isn't popping on because I have that magnet in place. And I'll go over disassembling gearbox, reassembling, and how everything works in a different video. This is just a quick one to get everything in place. Let's see what this is. Because this is hollow, there's actually a nice trick to keep that in place while you're reassembling it. I use this long Allen key. So what I can do is I can put it through the hollow spring guide, push it in place, and then I can use the Allen key to press down the spring guide, the spring, and the cylinder, or the piston, sorry. You want to make sure the piston's also centered. So you can hold it all down without having to fight everything. Okay, that's pretty painless, didn't have to do anything complex. I'm going to do a quick function check, push the piston or air nozzle in a few times. I'm also going to take my fat 3mm, put it in. I'm just going to push it slightly. That way I can tell the piston is moving freely. Hear that clink? That was the piston lining up with the 2 rails on both sides of the gearbox. So this way I know the piston moves freely, so when I run the gun it's not going to be misaligned and stuff like that. So you want to make sure you test that before you reassemble everything. So you have to go back in there and recenter the piston. And it's just a bunch more work. So, get the Phillips in first. Doesn't really matter too much what order. You can do a crisscross, you can do however you want to do it. The only thing to keep an eye out for is there are 2 different style of screw holes. So these are flat, you can see, which use the flat screws, but these concave ones are concave. Now for Kitaway, the concave ones are just the Phillips heads, so it makes it really easy. But not all brands do that. Sometimes they use the same screw head, but have different screws. So just keep an eye on that when you reassemble it in your gearbox. But Kitaway, pretty darn easy. Normally when you open up a gearbox, you just want to check for debris and check for shimming and maybe do a quick re-lube, things like that. But because I've been in this gearbox before, very, very recently actually, I didn't have to do any of that. So. And as I'm putting all these screws in, I see that the 2-piece hop-up unit, just as a reminder that I need to put that in while I'm putting the gearbox back in. That's it. I'm going to flip it over, do a quick trick by just moving the selector plate over, make sure safe works, and slide it all the way back, make sure that float works. Got that all done. Wires, so the power wire goes up the back, and then the power wires to the motor go down where the pistol grip goes. Line up the trigger, make sure I get everything over there all. Pinching the wires, lift the gearbox slightly, put the 2-piece hop-up unit with a little feed tray facing backwards. Looks good. Put the Phillips heads in. Those back in place. These two screws, just put them on the first one in finger tight, because you just want to have everything lined up correctly. So when you get the second one in there, you can do that one hand tight, but you just want to make sure they line up first. Now, there is an order of putting these back in place for a couple different reasons. Mostly to keep the gearbox aligned correctly, because if you tighten the piston grip screws too much, it's actually going to can it, causing misalignment issues, and you have issues getting the body pin back in. So the first one you actually want to get back in is the rear body pin. And I'm not gonna screw the whole thing in there, because I'm just gonna remove it later anyway. And then I put the trigger pin back in. There. Next, the piston grip. My two screws are still in there, and the red or positive goes in the left, negative goes in the right. And when you put these on, the piston grip on, you want to make sure that the wires are all the way through, so that you can see the wires coming out of the gearbox and not being pinched when you're screwing down the piston grip. So double check that with a flashlight, because you don't want to pinch those wires. Get the first one just finger tight, and then the next one get hand tight. And I'll go back and redo the first one, get that hand tight. And we already put the body pin in and the pistol pin in, or pistol trigger pin back in, so when I tighten these, I wasn't going to get anything canted. So when you're putting the wires back in, and the gun is facing to my left, by the way, the red wire is actually going to go from the left side, and it's going to curve around to the back side and come over the black wire. So a lot of times you can tell someone else has opened these up who doesn't know what they're doing, because they'll take the wires and they'll just try to plug them in this way. But this red wire curves around the pistol grip, comes to the back side, and it goes up with the black or the negative wire.